Okay, we're live, and today is May 24th, and we're at the home of Miss Catherine Revlin, who has so generously agreed to this interview. So Catherine, why don't you start off telling us your age and what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I'm 75 come November, God willing. And what's on my mind is really based on a conversation I had this morning about memory and about memoirs and about recording human experience. I have a very good friend, absolutely brilliant, retired curator at the museum, at Metropolitan Museum, an authority on European decorative arts. And ever since her retirement, she's really been losing her memory. And I talked to her today down in the basement, telling her about something very kind of like urgent that was going on right now. And she just couldn't wrap her head around it. And she said, you know, I'm really having difficulty. I just don't remember what I did 15 minutes ago, but I remember everything from 30 years ago. And I said, you know, I think that there's a reason for that. I said, what's going on today may or may not be of any great importance. It may be totally immaterial, may not be worth remembering. But what happened 30 years ago, if you still remember it, there's a reason for that. There's some kind of significance to, of all the things that you could have remembered in your life, you remember a few things about that particular era. And she just, the relief on her face was just like, she was flooded with this feeling of, oh, now I understand. And not only do I understand what happened 30 years ago, but I have a different perspective on it. Oh, it happened because something else happened. And all of these things are, I think, really part of human experience. And it's why what you're doing is so important. Because when you sit down and ask people about their life, this is the thing that is of significance to everybody, anybody who's had a life. And when suddenly you feel that someone else is interested in these things you remember from long ago, it evokes some kind of purpose to your life, things that only you experienced. And so I recently, because I just finished a very long project that took 7.5 years of my time, I kind of had this postpartum thing of now what? You know, what am I going to do next? And it took a while before I realized that what I want to do, and actually I just had everything on my desk here a little bit earlier, all of these papers and folders are things I've been working on for 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And about 20 years ago, I submitted a proposal, the first proposal, and it was turned down. And I did it again 10 years ago. Again, it was not accepted. And every time it was turned down by a publisher, I thought, well, that was a worthless piece of nothing. I don't know why I wasted my time. I'll never be a successful writer, blah, 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 the things we do. But then, I don't know, sometimes when I turn things over, you know, I say, I don't know what to do here. Please help me. And I go to sleep on it. I wake up with the answer. And I started taking out all these things that I've been researching all my life. And they're about my family history. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I recently found was written, my dad's gone. He's been dead for a good 10 years. But he did a genealogy on his side of the family. And it's never really meant anything to me. I thought, well, it was very nice he did that. But suddenly I'm very interested in the names of these people. And I'm interested in how they didn't have any last names because, okay, we've got Isaac, son of Peter. And so then Isaac has a son, and he's called Peter, son of Isaac. I mean, they just took their family, the first name of their family, and that became their last name. And so I'm looking at all these things I did all these years ago, and they're having a new significance because I have had a chance to filter them all. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't be in a hurry to write your memoirs.
Okay. Now, I noticed, because I did read your blog. I don't remember all of it, but I do remember Fargo, North Dakota. So tell me about what it was like growing up in Fargo.
Well, I grew up actually in a town of 80 people called Fort Ransom, North Dakota, which is about 80 miles from Fargo. And it was in this beautiful valley, and this was like where I've considered myself really being from. But we moved to Fargo in 1943 at a time when that was what people were doing.
So you
They were
5
moving.
years old then.
Yeah, well, I was 3. But we lived in I guess you call it a slum, the Borough Court Apartments. And it was so totally different from the life that I remember. Most of my early memories are going back to Fort Ransom, because that was, and to this day, it's kind of like Mecca for me. So growing up in Fargo in the 40s and 50s, you've read Babbitt, you've read all of, the Sinclair Lewis, takes on Midwestern small-mindedness, and that's pretty much Fargo.
Wow.
So as someone who, of course, I didn't know I was going to be an artist when I was a kid, but I already had that feeling of being an outsider. So I did, there were a lot of good things about growing up in Fargo. I had a great school system.
You said you had that feeling of being an outsider because you...
I didn't fit into the culture.
Oh, I see.
I was interested in things that other people thought were utterly unimportant. Mm-hmm. My parents didn't belong to the country club. I lived on the wrong side of the tracks. And my dad was in World War II, and he came home very ill. And we had a hard time for a long time. But what I remember about growing up is that we sang in 4-part harmony in the car. I mean,
How did your parents make a living? How did they support themselves?
Well, when my father was ill for a long time, he contracted typhoid while he was in World War II. You don't get typhoid in civilian life, but he came home with it. And he almost died. And so for a long time, I think we probably were supported by my mother's very large family and my grandparents on my dad's side. And Mother took in sewing and all that. And then finally Dad got a job with the IRS, and he had that job for the rest of his life. And I know he absolutely hated it. But you see, we didn't know we were poor. We just thought, we thought we had a good life. And I had 3 siblings, and I guess in the 50s, we look back on it now, and it was a very secure time. And people could pretty much count on having a job, and school was free. I think when I went to the University of North Dakota, it cost me like $90 a semester.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, it was a land-grant college. So there's so much of when I look back on that time, I didn't realize how privileged we were. That we didn't take a whole lot of money to have a good life. And I must have had a really good education because I've always succeeded academically. And I knew I wanted to be a writer from a very early age. And that's what I become.
Now, I noticed on your blog, you said your first attempt at writing was something about Spain.
3 witches who lived in Spain.
And then after that, your first published article was for the school newspaper.
Yes, yes. I actually got a journalism scholarship from that experience. And I look back at what I wrote in those days, and it was just corny and silly and meaningless. I thought that Ayn Rand was really a great thinker. You know, it's like, what do you know growing up in North Dakota in the 50s? Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, I learned the basic principles of journalism: who, what, where, how, why, and you tell it in the first paragraph. Mm-hmm. So I went to the University of North Dakota on a journalism scholarship, but it also included a summer, like an internship at the Fargo Forum, and that was where I discovered what women journalists could look forward to, that they would write about weddings or gardening or cooking, or maybe if they were lucky, they'd end up in the library, the morgue, you know. So I became an English major.
Okay.
And I guess most writers I know start out as readers. I mean, we read. And I still do to this day. And so it took me a while before I actually became a professional writer. Mm-hmm. I had 3 kids and, you know, like marriages. But I always knew that that was where I was headed. And I've been a professional writer since 1979.
I noticed your apartment is filled with artwork, photographs, books, and it leads me to believe that there's a story attached to every single thing in here.
Yes. Absolutely. And, you know, I've lived in this apartment since 1982, and it's artist housing. So I'm surrounded by, well, this was a neighbor. I mean, many of the pieces of art in here are from friends. Many of them are already gone. But it took a while before I figured out how to use this space. This is the old Bell Labs. So it was never intended to be a residence. It was intended to be for a bunch of scientists to, you know, bring in their test tubes and make radios. But a painter came in here one day, and she said, well, you have to square off the space. And only a painter would tell you that. And so this squared off the rectangle, and that squared it off. And then what happens in a squared space is you have a center that is even on all sides.
So this was something added on?
Everything here was added on.
Also, originally it was just straight through?
Yeah, it was just raw space.
Box.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then at that time I had my second husband and 3 kids living here, so we built a sleeping loft. But basically, I guess the thing that people are so taken with is certainly not the expense of my furniture, but first of all, it's the windows. It's the high ceiling, and it's the light, and it's what's outside the windows. And the other thing, I guess, is what you say, is that everything in here is meaningful. That plant there mm-hmm. was dying in the basement. Someone had thrown it out, and I rescued it.
Wow.
With fern. And every now and then I have to really cut it back. So
I have to confess, I can't even grow a cactus. I mean,
there you have to kind of want to do it.
It's terrible. Um, the thing that I get from this apartment is a sense of personality and intimacy. It seems very intimate.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, as spacious as it is, it just, what's the word I'm looking for? Certain type of humanness, a certain closeness, of intimacy. It just, everything seems to speak. You know?
Well, first of all, I have gone over every square inch with paint or cleaning. You know, I do my own cleaning. I can't ever bear the idea that I'd hire someone to come in and do what I can do myself. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about the human touch, that's quite literally what this is. You know, most of the lumber that have gone into these bookcases was found on the street. So the size of the pieces determined, you know, what it was going to look like.
Okay.
What can I tell you? And also, there's been a lot of a lot of people come in here and talk about how. Well, I have a friend who was helping me on a book, and she said, I have to write it. I can only work at your place. And I know what that is. It's because my work energy is here. Mm-hmm. My work energy is here. It's over there. I can work anywhere because I'm a professional writer. I can't have the luxury of only being able to work in one place. I can work, you know, on a hotel bed somewhere or whatever. But to have your work energy in one place, I recommend that for any kind of creative activity. That if you have some little corner of your place where you do a certain activity, something happens to the energy in that space. And if there's a lot of unhappiness and strife, I can walk into places where I can feel that. And I know that I couldn't possibly work. I probably could, but it wouldn't be very productive. So maybe you also feel that, is that I have a lot of good people in my life.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And I have all the right enemies. Really. I mean, I'm 74, but I'm a fierce troublemaker. Mm-hmm. And right now I'm just exposed the landlord. Mm-hmm. Some really nasty doings. And actually, here it is, right on the front page of the the Westview News, and it's causing a lot of trouble.
I haven't caught up with you with your latest installments.
Well,
the last thing I read was about the gangsters.
Oh, the gangsters. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the publisher likes is that I get deep into history. And
yeah, you research everything.
Yeah, I do. That's my thing. Yeah. And especially hidden history. And the story of what really goes on in Westbeth is this is low income housing in the most expensive zip code in the country. So you've got every developer and real estate person salivating over this square block of property occupied, how dare they, by a bunch of people who hardly make any money. And it's subsidized. I mean, you have to be officially low income to live here. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of corruption over the years, and it's going on to this very day. And that's why the article is entitled, "Will Westbeth be the next St. Vincent's?" Where suddenly people are shocked to find out that, you know, things have not been taken care of. So the landlord here, who is the executive director, is very angry at me. So that's why I say I have the right enemies.
So, let me go back to um, the aging process.
Oh, okay.
Um, Now, how has the realization that the aging process is set in with you, how has that affected you? Has aging come as any kind of surprise, regrets? Um,
Actually, it's been very liberating.
how so?
Um, for the past 10 years of my life, I've always been married or with a man. For the past 10 years of my life, I have not. And I am able to devote my entire day to what I want to do, to be with my children, to disappear, if I feel like it, into a project and maybe not return phone calls for days on end. So this has colored the aging process for me. You're a man, so you probably are aware of the fact that at a certain age, women can walk down the street and everybody leaves them alone. As a matter of fact, we're pretty much invisible. This was not true in my early youth, and it's hugely liberating. And truly, I mean, suddenly life is about so much more than am I pleasing my current male person, significant other, and he's going to get mad if I don't go off and meet his relatives or whatever it is. So that kind of has colored the aging process for me. The other thing is, I have really good genes. My relatives live forever. My mother just died 2 years ago at the age of 98, and her mother died at 97. We joke and think that when she waited, she wanted to one-up her mother. But my knees work pretty much. I can't ride a bike anymore. I have, because I live in the late 20th, early 21st century, I didn't go blind because I have glaucoma or cataracts. My mind works pretty good. And so my energy level is tremendously high. I get up at 6, I go to bed at 10. I know, you know what? I think a lot of the aging process is about what's going on in your mind.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's what's going on in my mind is this is the best time of my life. This is, I'm really reaping the rewards of raising children who are very close to me, and their children, and my sons-in-law, so that as I say it, I realize that I'm the center of my family. I'm the matriarch. And I've earned that.
So what about the past compared to the future to the present as far as technology goes? What about what was happening, say 25 years ago that is not happening now that you wish was brought back?
Okay. The good part, I don't have to cut and paste literally. I go to my computer and I do it like magic. I don't have to go to a library and do my research. I just go on the internet. But the other thing is my phone doesn't work. I have it plugged into my computer. They call it a line phone, but it's not a line phone anymore. It isn't plugged into the phone jack in the wall. It's plugged into your modem. And I call Time Warner, and they tell me, oh, your phone is fixed now. And you tried to call me today. So I've called them 4 times in the last 3 weeks. And I know what's going on is that all of these phone companies want you to have a cell phone. They want you to have a mobile phone because they're tired of fixing up the lines and going and getting the copper wires just so, and then they get wet, and then you have to replace them, and they have to dig a hole in the ground. And so that just annoys me no end. I know that, when Ma Bell was around, we had no choice. We had huge, 50-page phone bills where every long-distance call was, and sometimes if you call someone at the wrong time, long distance, you suddenly you have a $50 phone bill. Okay, but the other thing is your freaking phone worked, right?
Yeah, even if it was a party line.
Yeah. I mean, it really worked very well. And that was one of the things that I live in Bell Labs. I know that, that was very important to them. And they hired a bunch of geniuses to come to work here. And they said, look, we'll just leave you alone. Just invent something wonderful. And that's what they did.
If there was one thing that you could fix with today's society, what would that be?
Everything. Everything.
Okay.
I'd start with fossil fuel. I mean, if I were in charge, because I've been doing a lot of blogging on climate. The new word for it is not climate change; it's climate chaos. And we know that if people were funded to work on any kind of technology that was not fossil fuel, we'd have no problem at all. Because there's all kinds of stuff out there right now that are being done quite successfully. And finally, solar panels are becoming almost affordable. They've just discovered a new wind. It's not a turbine. It doesn't go like this. It's a different sort of vortex. So I would make sure that these things were well funded if I were in charge. I would also immediately break down the sides of banks. If they're too big to fail, they're too big to be. Pretty much everything Bernie Sanders is saying. Of course, he'll never get elected. I would make sure that college education was free, and that I would do by charging those transfer every time you have a stock transfer, which does nothing but shovel money into someone else's pocket. Little tiny stock transfer tax would give free college education to everybody. I would make sure that public schools and teachers got what they need instead of being vilified. I took advantage of a wonderful public school system where teachers were respected and paid decently. That seems. I would make sure that every public institution was protected and not privatized, which is what's been going on for the past 30 years. Apparently the word public is anathema to people in power. They want to privatize everything.
Like the prisons.
Oh, shall we go there? Okay, let's start there. First of all, get education in prisons. Next, anyone who's committed a nonviolent crime, most of it are drug related, immediately. Oh, come on, we have the worst statistics for incarceration of any developed country. Even the undeveloped countries do a better job. Listen to me. Are you sorry you asked me this question?
No. No, not at all.
Single payer. Let's do single payer.
Because I looked at your article on carbon footprint.
Oh, you did. Okay. Yeah.
I took your suggestion.
And one of the next ones I'm going to write is that remember the big climate change demonstration we had, the march last fall, and it was like a huge surprise. No one thought that millions of people were going to be marching. NBC, ABC, none of them were even there. The only ones who were there were Democracy Now!
Wow.
And you know who they had in the front line? indigenous people from all over the world, because they've been at it forever. And they're the ones who are going to teach us how to do it.
Democracy Now! She's on WBAI. What's her name?
Amy Goodman.
Amy Goodman.
She was there. And my son-in-law was into, he does this for a living. He does retrofitting of houses to make them more energy efficient. They had a solar panel on two bicycles with a little platform in between, so we would push the bicycles, which is like very low energy consumption. And the panel was tilted just right. Even on a cloudy day, we had enough energy coming from there so that people could plug in their cell phones and charge them while they were walking along with us.
Wow.
But the biggest surprise was how many people turned out.
Do you have any fears?
Do I have any
Fears.
fears? Yeah, I fear for every life form on the planet. Don't you?
Okay.
I fear for my grandchildren. This is the biggest crisis, as far as I'm concerned, that humanity has ever faced. What are you, nuts? We're not going to do anything about this? We're going to listen to Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush tell us that it's arrogant to say that it's caused by human beings? Let's stop this before my blood pressure goes up. And my voice level.
Which brings me to this question.
Yes.
If you had the money you needed and the time, what would you do or where would you go?
I'd buy a farm. My grandmother had an acre farm, a garden, because she had 8 kids. I'd raise vegetables. I'd have lots of roses, peonies, lilacs, the whole deal. I guess that's what I do.
Okay. Now, who are the people that had the greatest impact on your life? Or person?
This may sound very strange, but the people who have had the greatest impact on my life are the people in Central America who, under appalling circumstances, terrible fears, actually had the strength and the courage to fight some of the worst of what this country has. I just read a book about a bishop who was murdered in Guatemala City, and today is the anniversary. I think it's the 30th anniversary of Father Romero, who was murdered in El Salvador. And I guess it's because they're people in my own lifetime. I actually met one of them, Ringoberto Menchu, the woman from Guatemala, when we were doing the radio show. And so because their fear, it was so palpable, and it's going on today. They may not have Contras anymore in Central America, but they have drug cartels, and people are fleeing under the most dangerous circumstances, coming to the United States to try to not get killed, coming on the tops of trains. I mean, these are the people who, for me, because they're very much on my mind right now. If they can seek a way to better their lives under such circumstances, what's my excuse? With all the comforts of my life. And I feel so powerless to be able to do anything about it. It's been going on for as long as I can remember. Sorry to end on such a down note, but
Oh, it's not over.
oh, okay.
There's more.
All right.
One of the questions I'd love to ask is, if we didn't count birthdays, how old would you be?
22?
Okay. Okay. And finally, any closing thoughts, anything that I haven't asked that you want to talk about? Like, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a person who was a good listener and who was able to tell other people's stories by synthesizing what they told me in a way that has a kind of a universal meaning. And I guess I'm saying that because of the recent project I did, where I interviewed 120 people. I didn't do all the interviewing, but I did all the transcribing. You know, thousands of pages. But I was able to synthesize what would be of not only of interest, but of kind of a deeper meaning to other people.
I remember what you wrote. The greatest compliment to a ghostwriter is when somebody says it doesn't seem like it was ghostwritten.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I pay attention. I listen.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts in closing?
I think what you're doing is of paramount importance because we live in a time where the past doesn't exist, where what happened 2 weeks ago is already forgotten, where people have too much information that is simply useless, meaningless, time-wasting thing, and we need to preserve the richness of the kind of experience that we had that we didn't value because we didn't realize that we didn't realize what we had, and we didn't realize what would happen when we didn't have it. That there's a lack of face-to-face communication that is making people. I think it's a lot of the bullying that goes on. It's because it's very convenient to be a bully when you don't do your bullying to someone else's face.
Yeah. Right.
And we're just we're preservationists, you know. And what we value, I think 50, 100 years from now, God forbid that there are people around who, I don't know, let's not even go there. But for the future, to be able to understand the times that we're living in, I mean, don't you think they're going to go, how did this happen? How did things get so bad? And how did you get out of it? I mean, I don't have an answer to that.
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned is very significant, and that is the increase in technology and making everything so personal. The video games, the cell phones, the social media. People have become so isolated.
Yep.
You know, the socialization skills are just like lost. I mean, I remember as a kid that Sunday was, we're going to grandma's house.
Right.
We're going to have family dinner. Everybody's going to sit down and have dinner. Saturday night, you take your bath, you scrub your ears, iron your shoes, iron your shirts and get yourself ready to go to church and do that social event. And then after that, we go to grandma's or auntie's or someplace.
And
with
after you were
family.
through eating, you all sat around and talked to each other.
Yeah, and went through the family album. You know, who is this and
Yep.
how this first cousin or second cousin or
Yep,
whatever.
right.
But now, everybody's in their own room and got their walking down the street oblivious to everybody else on their cell phones and video games.
Playing these addictive games with no meaning.
I get on the subway, and if there's 40 people in the car, 30 of them have some kind of Nook,
You're
cell
going like
phone,
this, right?
something,
Yeah,
you know.
I know.
I mean, it's so rare when you walk by a stranger and they say, "Hi, how you doing?"
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get in an elevator one day and turn around and face everybody and see how everybody panics.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
All right.
I have a better understanding of my own self from all the talking I've done.
Okay. All right.